Hi. I'm here to talk about something very dear to my heart, crafting a greener future. It's always important to care about the environment. And when I talk about the greener future, it's important to know I'm talking about environmental sustainability and not the color, even though coincidentally that's my favorite color. So who am I? I'm just a girl standing in front of a crowd asking you to love the planet. I know, I'm not gonna do much more movie quotes because, yeah, that kind of becomes an awkward show of my age when no one understands them. I'm a senior PHP developer at Leap. I have a lot of roles there. We are self-organized, so I do essentially what I want, like speaking here. But most of my work is programming in Symfony. And I do mainly backend because I'm not good at making things pretty. They just become really green. I have stage fright, so if you notice my voice shaking, just ignore it and try to listen to me. Anyway, I'm here to talk about something important despite of it. And if sustainability bores you, you can always spend the talk trying to guess my accent. And here's a cute picture of me with a dragon. She's the one who causes those Friday fires you're afraid of when deploying. Now, sustainability really, really has to be for everyone. So this talk isn't rocket science if you're coming here to learn something super cool and new and advanced. You're in the wrong room, but I'm here to inspire you and to do more because PHP touches so much of the web. And doing just a little thing here and there will have massive impact. It's sort of like not using, single-use plastic is one person not using plastic, that's ridiculous, doesn't really matter so much. But everyone not using plastic, now that has an impact. So if I somehow can inspire everyone in the PHP world, that would be a dream, right? Because we would change the web. So the web is sort of like a worldwide waste, if we're honest. And with all the modern technology we have today, it's becoming more and more and more wasteful. That's not great. We do not have an energy production crisis. We have an energy consumption crisis. We just consume and consume and consume until there's nothing more to consume. The internet was a country, it would be the world's 4th largest polluter. This is the opening statement of the Sustainability Web Manifesto. And it's one that sticks with me pretty well. So, yeah, think about that for a moment. Maybe if everyone that does PHP, we could bring it back to 5th largest polluter if we do something. Speaking of worldwide waste, video made up 82.5% of all internet traffic in 2023. We have a huge problem with this. Video is inefficient. And now with social media and everything that we're doing, we're adding video more than text. We just have a video here, we have video there, without thinking about the effects. You know the saying, a picture paints 1,000 words? Well, not quite. 1,000 words, give or take, depending on size, is about 2 A4 pages, 6 kilobytes. 2 A4 pages of well-compressed images is about 160 kilobytes, so you can see the difference. And just a 30-second video, which you think will explain things quickly, nicely, and easily, that easily goes up to 3 megabytes. So think about that for a moment. Text is really the best way to go about it. We should go back to those cool blog posts that we had. You know, I like reading more anyway. So, to reduce carbon emission in software, there's a couple of things we're talking about. Energy efficiency, which is consuming the least amount of electricity as possible. This is pretty straightforward. This is about being more efficient. Then there's carbon awareness. Do more when the electricity is cleaner and less when it's dirty. Be aware of when the carbon is just bad. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that later in this talk. Then there's hardware efficiency. Use the least amount of embodied carbon possible. So this is about things like your phones. How often do you replace them? Are you being a little bit wasteful? Often do you replace the laptop that you use to develop PHP? Do you really need the latest laptop, or can you use it a little bit longer? Can you be less wasteful? PHP is really, really good at running at a little bit older legacy servers. Take advantage of this. Don't get the newest things. Use the hardware that we have, please. Important to note is that I am hardly alone thinking about sustainability on the web. So following the best software principles of not invented here, and let's stand on the shoulders of giants. So the V3C sustainability guidelines is a group of people who have thought about a way to make the web more sustainable. And I am the lead community representatives of them. The V3C sustainability guidelines is split into 4 sections. User experience, covering research and ideation. I fully, heartedly recommend looking at these if you do any UX. But this is not what this talk is about. Then there's web development. Who in here does web development? Everybody! Almost. Okay. Some people maybe fell asleep in your chairs. Oh, don't do. That's also cool. You're doing app development or something. Okay. So that covers development approach, code minimization, which isn't much of a thing in PHP. So there is some sustainability guidelines. I got distracted by hands. So there's also hosting, infrastructure, and systems, covering environment commissioning, minimizing environment and data, minimizing human disruptions. We're not really going to go into the guidelines so much here, but we will talk about it. And then, last but not least, there's something we're not going to talk about at all. But it doesn't mean it's not important. And if you're into business strategy and product management, look into these guidelines, please. One of the important things to do is aligning technical requirements with sustainability goals. What does that mean exactly? It means that you carefully consider the long-term technology implications. You know, if you choose something less optimized, it might be quicker to develop it now, but over the course of time, is it really better for sustainability? I would say not. So it's easy to make quick decisions that ends up with the planet paying for them. So make sure you align when you plan your products. Then, of course, security, extremely important. And the sustainability guidelines says websites that have no outstanding security issues are less likely to become a target for individuals who might exploit them, consuming vast amounts of data in the process. One thing that is really cool in PHP today is that we get a lot of things built in. We can, I mentioned not invited here before. The times where each and every one made their own web framework, it's over. We had fun, but it's over. A lot of the frameworks, libraries, ORMs, and DBLs we have in PHP today makes following best security practices easy and straightforward. I really don't recommend you to roll your own vanilla things today. Saved effort is saved energy and great for sustainability. Also, please remember, never store unencrypted sensitive data. I know everybody of you know this, but don't do it, because I know some people do it anyway. And for sustainability, one of the most important things we can do is protecting against brute force attacks. Because a brute force attack, what is it? Everybody here knows what a brute force attack is? Yay! Great. So, when people do brute force attacks, they consume vast amount of data. So therefore, this is, for sustainability, sort of the number one security thing to think about. And for strong passwords, do not limit the length of passwords ever, please. Also allow me to use Swedish characters in my passwords when we're on it. You can limit the login attempt to kind of slow down an attacker. That's helpful sometimes. But remember that cookies are not a reliable method of storing login attempts, because cookies can be messed with. I've seen that done a lot. It's better to use a database or some other form of storage. Do not block an entire IP. I've seen this a lot, where a proxy server gets blocked because someone in there was logging in too much, and suddenly a whole company or something can't log in. And that becomes a little bit awkward. But for websites where you want real security, something that's, sensitive, you can consider allowing an option to allow only some IPs. That doesn't hurt at all. That's a great idea, and it definitely blocks out brute force attackers. I kind of want to say annoy the users for security and for the planet. You can implement reCAPTCHA, because it does slow down these attacks. And some of them give up. Another useful thing where they give up very quickly is multi-factor authentication. Today, it's easier than ever to implement this. So go ahead, do it. Monitor your server logs. If you suddenly see in your server logs a lot of HTTP 401 together with occasional 200 status codes, there's probably something there. So you can write a script to warn you when this happens. When this pattern happens, you want to be alerted. Right. So let's talk about dependency hell. It's really more a thing in JavaScript than it is in PHP, because Composer and all the tools we have today, they're more than awesome. But we still have to be mindful, because all the dead code we have and all the dependencies we have how aware are you of them? What do you have a lot of extra code, a lot of extra stored code for what? For that little function you can have written in 2 lines? Think a little bit, and also look in your Composer files. There's this really neat little trick, Composer unused. Because often when I've been refactoring something, I end up with a lot of unused code. So this is kind of dead tree shaking in PHP. And it's really easy to install, and it works like this. Oh, I'm sorry for blinding you. Okay, so this is kind of the waking up thing. See? It's really nice, and you see which packages are used and unused, and I'm going to switch to a dark slide before you all go blind. But regularly check your dependencies and keep them up to date is also extremely important for security and for the planet. And another thing we need to talk about more is accessibility. Because if a user can't use your website as intended, that will just be waste, pure waste. And you'll be shutting people out. So you really have to think about accessible solutions. Otherwise, I would say your website isn't sustainable at all. And I'm not here to talk about sustainability, but if you want to learn more, Ramona Doman is giving a talk at 4:10. We need you, accessibility on the web. Another thing that is sort of obvious, avoid code duplication. So, it's easy to avoid code duplication on code you write yourselves. But what are you supposed to do when you have this huge legacy thing? Sure, you can do Composer unused, you can try to detect all these different things. So there's token-based solutions which a lot of people do, and then you see, okay, 2.3% of your code is duplicated. What are you supposed to do with that? I prefer to use PHP stan because it uses an abstract syntax tree. It ignores value objects and all these things because that's not true duplicate code. And just install these rules, set up your PHP stan.neon, analyze, and ta-da! You will find no duplicated code. Really cool, right? So, another thing which goes into dependencies again is rigorously assess third-party services. They can be a little bit of a black box, but you sort of want to see that API that I'm using, how are they hosting their code? Are they really sustainable? And today, it's more important than ever, because we all started using AI. And when OpenAI trained its LLM, ChatGPT-3 that we've all been playing with, it produced an equivalent of around 500 tons of carbon dioxide. That's a truckload. If you go from here to Sydney, it's 8.6 tons. And all the use of AI, is it really worth it? Is it really worth it to have all these fun little things? I don't know. It's something we have to think about for sure. Another thing, always use HTML elements correctly, or our browsers have to work more, and also users, accessibility. Always use them correctly. It's especially true for PHP developers, I found, that they sort of forget in our Twig templates and things. I'm guilty of this as well, to just forget. But make sure to do it correctly. Run fewer, simpler queries. Let's talk a little bit about performance. Because performance directly impacts carbon emissions. Performance optimization is not optional for a sustainable website. It's A and O of sustainability. The first thing to remember about performance is that not doing work is faster than doing it. As programmers, we like to solve problems with technical solutions. But perhaps the technical solution isn't the best way to solve the problem. So the first thing to think about is, should I actually program this? Maybe not. Also, you need to use tooling. Because if you just go into your code and look at it, you're never gonna figure out where the performance hog is and what you can optimize. I'm a Symfony developer. I like using Blackfire and the Symfony debug bar. It's really helpful. But I know there's also the Laravel debug bar that helps you. You can optimize your website from there. You can also use Xdebug and PCO. I hope I pronounced that correctly. It's really, really useful tools. They are meant for different things, and I like to use them both, which becomes really, really problematic because they don't really work that well together. But some years ago, I found this awesome blog post that I recommend here looking at, which made it really, really easy to switch between Xdebug and PCO. The reason is that Xdebug is a little bit slower than PCO because it does so much more under the hood, which is extremely useful. But sometimes you want performance over all the features, so you have to kind of choose what you want. And then in the next section of sustainability guidelines, there's green hosting. But let's stop talking about the guidelines now. I think you all get it and you can go read them yourselves. I do recommend it. Web traffic in 2021 exceeded 2.8 zettabytes. 1 zettabyte is equal to 1 sextillion bytes. That's 100. I'm not going to read all those zeros. That's a lot of zeros. Simply put, to have something that you all can relate to a little bit more, it would mean 1 billion 1 terabyte hard drives. Huh. Yeah, wow. Data storage is cheap, we say. Is it? Really? I didn't look up the facts for how much carbon is emitted to make one of those terabyte hard drives. But we can say it isn't cheap. Not for the planet anyway, just for the wallet. A lot of our web traffic is through our web APIs. How many people in here are API developers? most of you. So, how do we make more sustainable APIs? This is where we start looking at carbon awareness. I'm so sorry. This is a screenshot from electricitymaps.com that does not implement dark mode. And you can see here the different carbon intensity in different countries. So you can see Sweden, where I'm from, at this time of day that I took the screenshot, 1 p.m. It's really beautiful and green. Let's zoom in a little bit on Europe, a little bit more dark on the sides. You can see the Poland. You should probably not host your data there, huh? And you can see Netherlands. It's 1 p.m. sort of yellow. Huh. Sorry. We should compare Sweden and the Netherlands a little bit more, because this is so much fun to gloat. But you see that Netherlands at 1 p.m., it still has mostly sustainable and renewable energy, because Netherlands depends a lot on solar energy, while Sweden depends a lot on hydro energy. But what happens then when the sun goes down? Here's the screenshot from the Netherlands again at 1 p.m. You can see it's still not very sustainable. This is, by the way, estimated data, so it's not fully correct, but it's just to paint a picture. And then this happens when the sun goes down at 7. Then you start relying on gas. And as PHP developers, when do we like to run our cron jobs? At night! What happens then? It runs on gas when we host it in the Netherlands. I know it's not so efficient because you wanna balance when users use the website. You don't want to run your cron jobs and all these kind of things. But maybe you have to think about the architecture a little bit more and how to do the bulk operations in the Netherlands a day. That's greener. So that's what it means to be carbon aware. Depending where you host, there's differences. In Sweden, it doesn't matter. I can run my code at night. You can't.
Something drought?
So let's introduce API Echo Mode. I saw an amazing presentation last year at Nordic APIs in Sweden, where they introduced me to this thing called API Echo Mode. So you know when a dishwasher runs on Echo Mode and it takes 3 hours and you're waiting forever? It's good for the environment because it uses colder water. And the dishes get just as clean. It's pretty cool. What if we can do the same thing in our APIs? We can add a header to our APIs. Echo Mode on. Great. So what should Echo Mode do then exactly? Well, if we have a queue-based solution, we can send all those Echo Mode requests to an Echo queue, and then we can consume those messages and run the workers when the energy is greener. Because then you let your consumers control, is this request really that important? Do I need to process it now? Probably not. I don't need to update the stats right away. I can do that at daytime instead of now when I'm up with insomnia. And the order confirmation probably has to be a priority. So you can implement this pattern. An event-driven architecture is asynchronous, and that means it usually uses less resources and it's more sustainable anyway. So look into queues if you haven't already. Symfony Messenger, Laravel queues, and more. I use Symfony Messenger, and I think it's awesome. You become kind of addicted to it. How many people in here use Messenger of different kinds? Cool, half of you. So, I really think you should read through the V3C guidelines, even though I forgot to add a link in the presentation. That's really awkward. But you can just Google them. And you should use static code analysis to find code smells such as duplicated code and anything else that makes your code more efficient. Performance is still extremely important. And if you want to do some performance optimizations, this is a nice way to convince your boss. It's for the planet. Maybe your boss won't listen to that. Security is always a no-brainer, especially for this. Accessibility is an important part of sustainable web development. Align your technical requirements with sustainability goals. So think about this before you start coding. Think about all the shortcuts you want to make. Are they worth it? And if your data centers are in the Netherlands, your servers can also sleep at night. Possibly use a queue-based architecture and API in echo mode. And it's kind of cheesy to end with this, but clean your code for a cleaner planet, please. Thank you.
Let's do questions or?
Questions?
I have a question about yeah, we did some research into implementing message queues, and concluded that it was actually faster for our performance to just respond to a request instead of putting like a second container for the queue only, which to me seems like it would also be less eco-friendly to have a worker there the whole time. How do you see that?
Yeah, I haven't. So it's less eco-friendly to have the worker all the time rather than. Yeah. So this famous answer is, of course, it depends.
Yes.
But if the worker runs constantly, then it means some other process would run constantly anyway. So it's not really less eco-friendly that way. But if you have a worker that only runs sometimes,
Yeah, okay.
it can be less sustainable, that's true. But if it's part of your architecture and it's just part of the processes that run, I haven't done any benchmarking, so I can't answer this for sure. But a process needs to be running one way or another. So if you have a queue-based architecture, it should be faster.
Yeah, and I suppose implementing the queue for only eco mode could be a way to do it.
That could definitely be a way to do it.
All right.
Hello, thank you. I have a question about saturation. So, am I right thinking that looking at the saturation is the good for the planet. So when your servers are loaded really high, it's better, and when they stay doing nothing, it's kind of a waste of resources, even in the eco sense.
Yeah. So what you should do really is to use basically the cheapest servers that you can. If you have all these servers with lots of memory and lots of things doing nothing, that's not great. But it doesn't really... Yeah, it depends a little bit, I would say. I'm not quite sure how to answer that question. I haven't done the benchmarks to know exactly when it would be cleaner, how big the server is or not. So I'm not sure I can
I'm
answer
not
that.
talking about the big server or small server, I'm talking about saturation. So let's say the server is the same, but one server is loaded like 90%, CPU, memory, everything, and another one is doing nothing. So which one is greener?
Well, they both use, so either one use lots of energy and one use a little energy. So the one who uses a little energy is greener. So it's all about energy usage then. So if you overload your servers, they start using a lot of energy and a lot of power. And that's really bad for because it draws more electricity. So you should try to never overload your servers, because then that overloads the electricity network. So then it's better to balance between both servers, because then they don't draw as much electricity.
Yeah, I think do we have a limit on the time for a question, because I'm already like out?
5 more minutes.
We can discuss it after.
Other questions?
Hello.
Hello?
I have an interesting question. Once upon a time, I was in a challenge for students who was designing a game, and the challenge was students need to be design a game and put them on a floppy disk. So during the challenge, professor find that a code duplication and a lot of bad practices and breaking the salt actually improves the performance due to we have a limited memory and a limited processor units. So what do you think about that? You said that we need to avoid duplication, we need to use less dependencies, less composer packages, but maybe if even better, because we can increase our development speed and decrease our pollution during the development. Thank you.
Yeah, so one thing that I forgot to mention was indeed the pollution during the development, because if you develop faster, that of course takes less energy. But you have to think long term. If you take a little bit longer time developing something that runs much better and uses less energy, then that will be better in the long run. But if it takes a really long time to develop something where you could have used something, a little bit of duplication, it could be worth it. It's all about the technical requirements, because you have to see, okay, is it worth it for me to spend a year on this versus a week? Probably not. So probably you want to take those shortcuts. That's totally okay sometimes.
Right, so I can say my employees that I write bad code because I want to save the planet, right?
Please don't say I said that. No, you can't do that.
Right. Okay, thank you.
Thank you. I think that's all. So thank you.